Thank you so much, Mark. And just before starting, it's really important for me to share some of the gratitude and blessing that's in my heart today, this morning. I'm on the West Coast, so either good morning or good afternoon. But first, just to IJS for all of the work that you guys do, especially this daily sit that just brings together all of us from all over the country, on a daily basis. And for me, there's just huge blessing in seeing so many people from different parts of my life that I really adore. He's here today, and I got to sit with him. He led the sit yesterday, Rabbi Brian Yosef Schachter Brooks. Brian and I both taught and practiced at Chokhmat Halev in the 90s, a Jewish meditation center in Berkeley. And, here we are now, and Marla and Joe Kaufman, who are congregants at Temple Bethel, and quite a few other people that I see here that our paths have crossed and touched each other's lives in different ways. So just had to get that out of the way. This morning, I want to. There's a piece from this week's Parsha that I want to explore a little bit, and it's the piece that says, "And now, Israel, what does Hashem, your God, ask of you, but to fear Hashem, your God, to go in all of his ways, to love God and to serve God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your might, keep the mitzvot, which I command you today for your benefit." So these two statements, to fear God and to love God, are two core wings our sages have really taught that our avodah, or our spiritual service in Judaism, is really rooted on fearing God. And for most of us, we are comfortable with this loving God, but the idea of fearing God is a little bit more challenging. And I think especially it's challenging because for those of us, which is probably most of us, who grew up with, a sense of God as something out there and up there, this sense of fearing conjures up this punishing presence that's outside, that you better watch out. If you don't do the right thing, you're going to get zapped, something like that. And yet this we can't avoid. And it's so important to be able to explore what this piece of Torah is about. So, the first piece is to share that it's important to recognize that the word for fear here in Hebrew is yirah. And the sages have really taught that there are kind of two kinds of fear, a lower fear and a higher fear. And they talk about the lower fear is sometimes used, the word that's used more is pachad in Hebrew, but the higher fear is one that's yirah. And for those of us who are aware, it's connected to the Hebrew word lirot, which means to see. So this idea of fearing God or having yirat Hashem is about seeing, in some ways, being able to see in some way, to open our eyes and our minds to the presence of God in a more deep way. And so it's this attention that causes us to translate, instead of fear of God, of awe of God, right? Because that word awe, A-W-E, is really about being able to see and open to the majesty in the universe, the incredible depth that's possible within us and without us. It's that kind of awesome, that to use the vernacular, when we really use it, it's speaking about being in the presence of something great. And yet, for a lot of us, that's where we stop. Usually, when you think of awe, being in awe, there really isn't that sense of being afraid. Because, I can be in awe of an incredible sunset, like blowing my mind and heart open, and I'm not afraid in that moment. I'm in a place of awe. And yet this sense of fear is very much a part of this word yirah. And so what I want to suggest is that when we start to open and start to see the incredible connections that we are a part of, the depth of reality that we are a part of, we realize that this word that we use for God is also in some way speaking to the vast interconnection web of relationships that we're a part of. And if we can imagine it as a spider web or as dropping a pebble in a pond with the ripples that go out, when we start to become aware of this interconnection in deep ways, we realize that whatever actions we do, we pull on one part of the web, it's going to affect something over here. And we realize that it's so easy to cause suffering. It's so easy to cause suffering among people that we love, in the world, unintentionally. We always say, when all chait, what we're going to say on High Holy Day is that word chait. There are lots of different words for sin, but chait is a word that means an unintentional sin, according to the rabbis, like missing the mark, an archery term, as opposed to deliberately crossing a boundary, an averah. So, and yet our prayers are al chait, which is saying that on some level, and that's for another talk, but on some level, all the missteps that we do, the mistakes that we do are chait, are unintentional. So it's so easy to pull on one side of the web and cause suffering somewhere else. And when we really start to realize and see this, there becomes this sense of awe is, wow, I really want to make sure that I act and I move in a way that is bringing blessing to the world, because I don't want to, when I open to this awesomeness of God and this interconnection I'm a part of, I realize how easy it is to cause suffering. So that's the kind of fear that we're talking about. And before we practice, the last piece that I want to share is this beautiful parable on this verse from the Maggid of Mezrich, one of the direct disciples of the Baal Shem Tov. And he, in talking about this sense of awe of God, he speaks about a son who is constantly with his father. And when he's constantly with his father, he behaves. He doesn't hurt himself because he's very aware. He has a sense of awe or fear of his father. He knows that if he does something that's going to be hurtful to himself or others, he's going to be corrected, reprimanded, whatever that is. And yet it happens that sometimes there's distance from the father to the son, and the son's not with the father, he's with his other friends, and he hurts himself. He does something that he shouldn't have been doing, and he hurts himself. And the father, seeing that he hurts himself, comes and with just, great love, compassion, realizes that his hurt is going to turn into an infection if he doesn't take care of it. And for those of us who are parents, we know exactly what that moment is like. And so there is, in pulling out the thorn, or our modern terms might be in applying the alcohol wipe that's going to burn to make sure that there's no infection, the child feels great pain, feels that kind of intensity. And for the child, they fear the pain from the father cleaning out the wound more than they fear the actual hurt that they did themselves. But for the father, it's really about taking care to prevent that infection. And so the father brings this certain kind of fear or awe of realizing how easy it is for the child to hurt themselves. And so that kind of care is what the father is bringing. And so the Maggid says that when we have that verse that says et Adonai, We know in modern Hebrew that when you have an et, like fearing God, et Adonai, that's just used grammatically to signify a direct object. But for the Hasidic masters, it always has an extra meaning, that et. And so that et is along with, is translated as along with. So we fear along with God. That's what the commandment is. That there is so much that God is actually having, so from the deep awareness of God, knows how easy it is to do spiritual harm to ourselves or to others. And so this awe of God that we want to have is awe along with God of how we can be a blessing and how we can act in the world. So at this point, we'll have an opportunity for practice. And the practice today is going to be about cultivating awe. We become what we practice. So whatever happens when our eyes are closed in that moment is what we're practicing, the kind of person that we want to be. So we'll just do a short melody, a short nigun to lead us into the silence. Feel free to join me. Inanai, nai, nananai, nai, nanai, nai. Inanai, nai, nananai, nai, nanai. Inanai, nai, nananai, nai, nanai, nai. Inanai, nai, nananai, nai, nanai. Ai, rai, 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 rai. Ai, rai, 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 rai. Ai, rai, 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 ai, rai, rai, rai. Ai, rai, ai, rai, 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 rai. Nanai, nai, nananai, nai, nanai, nai. Nanai, nai, nananai, nai, nanai. Nanai, nai, nananai, nai, nanai, nai. Nanai, nai, nananai, nai, nanai. Yai, nai, 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 ai, 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 ai. Ai, 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 ai. Ai, 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 ai. So let yourself settle in to your seat, becoming aware of your body in space, noticing the pressure of your bottom on the chair, the way your legs extend out of your hip sockets and end in the contact of your feet on the ground. As you stay aware of your legs in space, expand your awareness to include the distance of your spine from the bottom to the top of your head, the way your arms hang out of your shoulders and the resting place of your hands. Notice the movement of breath as the air enters through your nostrils or your mouth. Noticing how the belly or the chest or even the whole body expands to make room for that inhale. Noticing the place where the inhale switches over into an exhale and the body contracts as the air leaves the body. Again, paying attention to that place where the exhale switches to the inhale. Being present moment by moment for the experience of being in a body and breathing. And as you pay attention to the breathing and the body in the moment, consider that every cell in your body from every system, from lymphatic to skeletal to circulatory to digestive and on. Every cell is filled with divine intelligence. It knows exactly what it needs to do to function in harmony with all of the other systems in the body, the mini organisms that make up the major organism. And as you consider the divine intelligence that is present in each cell, allow yourself to open to the possibility that every part of your moment-to-moment experience of breath and body and sensation has infinite depth. That what we are perceiving in this moment is just the surface. And in fact, everything in our field of awareness that even extends beyond our bodies, the sounds we hear, the air on our face, every molecule has infinite depth. Divine intelligence allowing it to help sustain life on this planet. The one who desires life, the infinite one present in every part of our experience. And when we open to and consider that infinite depth, that infinite possibility of our moment-to-moment experience, there is a sense of awe. On the high holy days, we have the practice of prostration, of getting down on our knees and placing our heads on the floor before the Holy One. Consider an attitude or an orientation of prostration, not actually physically moving our bodies in this moment, but instead the inner movement that bows before this moment, that acknowledges that the presence that we experience in this moment is the Holy One of Being. Allow ourselves that inner bowing. I'm going to be quiet for the last 5 minutes of our sit. And just invite you to keep coming back to that experience of body and breath that grounds your awareness in the here and now. That opening to the divine, to the infinite, not as something separate from our experience, but as the ground and expression of our experience. And allow ourselves that orientation of that inner prostration. That goes by very fast.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much, Rabbi Kavod Wieder. Thank you so much for leading us beautifully in practice today, which we seal as we do every day, friends, by offering an opportunity for those of you in mourning, or if you're observing a yard site today, or if it's your custom to participate in Kaddish, to recite the Kaddish, and for those who are not doing so, to remain present, supportive, compassionate presence for those who are invited to put the name or names of those you're honoring, remembering today in the chat box, either now or after you recite Kaddish. And thanks to Kat for sharing the words of the Kaddish on the screen. And for those who are reciting Kaddish, I invite you to join me by rising in body or in spirit to do so. Thanks to Kat for putting the words up. Yid Gadal,
Yid Kadash, Rabbi,
Mad
Yifrach, Agalavi, Antari, Amin, Yehishme, Rabba Mavarach, Lelam, Lame, Amaya, Rab, Yitamambi, Tadar, Vitale, Vitalal, Shmed, Gabri, Labing, Gavashir, Tavanach, Amiran, Mavim, Bishlama Rabba Min Shemaya, Amin, Teshalom Bimrama, Belkol Yisrael,
Ishlama Rabba Min Shemaya,
Imru,
Chaim
Amin.
Aleinu Israel, Shalom Bimrama, Yasef Shalom, Aleinu, Ya'alkol Yisrael, Ya'alkol Yoshvei Tebel, Bimru, Amen. Friends, thank you so much for joining us today, as always. And we want to thank our teacher for today, joining us for the first time, Rabbi Kavod Wieder of Temple Bethel of South Orange County in California this morning in California time. Thank you so much for leading us. Kavod was just beautiful teaching, and an important one leading into the season of Yirah, season of awe. So thank you for helping us embark on that journey. Of course, thanks to Ken Esposito for holding our text base with skill and grace. And most of all, thanks to all of you for showing up for your practice today and for each other. You're welcome, as always, to stay on for questions for our teacher for today, Rabbi Kavod, and also just to share reflections on your experience with the practice, if you'd like, in the chat box. And for those of you who are leaving us, you'll be back tomorrow. We'll be led tomorrow by Dr. David Gottlieb of the Spertus Institute in Chicago. And on Friday, we will sit into Shabbat with Rabbi Shefat Gold, who will lead us at our usual time. So we hope he'll be with us at one or both of those meditations, or sometime soon in the future. And we hope you stay safe and well. So I'm going to invite Kavod to come on in. And if you have a question to put to him, please put it in the chat box. If you can, preface it by writing the word question in caps, makes it a little bit easier to follow that. Kavod, thanks so much. As I mentioned we're headed into what's the quote days of awe. Sorry to mention that to congregational clergy, but it seems to be true. But we're far enough out that still plenty of time to prepare. And you're helping us in this movement towards what is our relationship with this word yirah, the Hebrew word, which is, like you said, it has a range of connotations. And I wanted just to stay with that in terms of how we use our practice to cultivate an awareness. So you also mentioned, I think, that that a lot of us grew up with or had a sense of God is something out there to be feared. And so here the challenge is really like, how do we take, what do we mean by fear in that sense? And how do we take what is true and beneficial about it without succumbing to or without falling prey to what may feel an unhealthy, unwholesome relationship to it in that sense, which is tricky. Does that make sense? Is a question? Okay. Yep. So I always take refuge, by saying, yes, yirah is usually translated as fear, but don't worry, it's also could be translated as awe or reverence. And people can, it's a lot, it's a sense of that we can relate to, as you said, it's it's interesting. The English word awe is kind of hard to unpack. Or describe, but it's a sense of this large, the sense of largeness and expansiveness that kind of can take our breath away, and in which we feel small but not diminished, I guess, in not small but not insignificant, significant and yet small. So that's where I go to that. But you're inviting us to, I think, to take on a different challenge. What is fear? What's the role of fear? Like you said, for me, what I took away was, yes, I'm afraid. I don't want to hurt anything. I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to cause damage. I'm afraid of that. That seems like that's an important function. So is that where you were going with it? Like, like thinking about using fear in that way?
Yeah. But it's important that we're also not speaking about it independently from love. Because both of those, that kind of balance, the rabbi, I forgot where I heard it, but that love and fear are like two wings on a bird. Mm-hmm. On one hand, we first start with, again, we have to do what my teacher, Rabbi David Zeller, said is take out our dogma scraper and scrape away all those ideas of God as being something separate from us and from life. And instead, come into our experience of the sacred. And for me, that's best articulated in the network of relationships that I'm a part of. Mm-hmm. That's where I experience sacred, is through relationship. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the fear is coming from, is wanting to honor, not wanting to dishonor mm-hmm. the connection of relationships that I'm a part of. So if I only had that sense of yirah and that was it, I wouldn't do anything. I'd be walking around right. so
just do no harm.
Right. I don't want to step on anybody. I don't want to step on any eggshells, and I wouldn't put forward my spirit or gifts or any of those things into the world. People might experience me as, a nice kind of humble guy, but that's would be the extent of it. So that's where the love of God and the love comes in, because it's the love that says, I want to step forward to actualize and celebrate these connections that I'm a part of. I want to bring creation, create to help honor and give glory to the connections that I'm a part of. And so it's that tension between the love and the yirah. On one hand, I want to step forward and share and honor those connections. But on the other hand, I want to be careful and present to how I move in the world and what I do. And, for me, and others may relate to it, one of the biggest ways of bringing yirah into my practice is to slow down. You know, I'm a busy guy, lots of things moving always pretty quickly from one to the other. And when I'm moving quickly, I'm mostly motivated, and what's present in my consciousness is my world and my agenda. And so, in some sense, when I slow down and actually pay attention to the people around me and what's going on, how can I move from a place that's a little slower, a little bit more conscious? That allows for that opportunity to notice how my actions are coming in the world. What's the risk? What's the feedback that's coming back? And so I think you got to hold that balance of the love and the awe and the fear.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. That's beautiful. So a lot of questions. I'm going to see if we can try to fit these in. So Pauline is asking, it's a big question. Well, these are big questions. Is the divine wisdom, which is so vast and interconnected, also the expression of a personal God? So there's basically an opportunity for us to explore, like how you're just describing the divine as this, vast web, as you described it, interconnectivity, right?
Yeah.
How do we, how do you, maybe best to answer this personally, like, how do you square that with the idea of a, quote, personal God, or using interpersonal language around God?
Yeah, I mean, these kind of theological questions, what we're, really trying to do is put a frame of the limitations of categorizing through words and language on something that is really beyond description and all of that. But what I will say is that for me, what I'm referring to is very personal. That I feel like this presence that is found in those interconnections and in me and in everybody is a presence that loves and cares and sees and is aware and all of those things. Again, when we talk about personal God, we can't help but try to translate our own sense of what a person is onto God, and so immediately when we do that, it's easy to then suddenly we put God in this box under what we categorize in our minds as person, right? So that's where it gets challenging. But if you want to talk about presence and awareness, like, do I feel is really kind of the depth of my personhood really ultimately about heart and awareness and presence, and intelligence. Again, not in intelligence in a sense of purpose and pattern. I'm just throwing words at this mystery here that we're a part of. But I think that ultimately, I think what's important in response to the question is to just be so aware of how we put God in the boxes of our definitions, and that as soon as we have a definition of something that we can talk about and say, this is God, we've lost it.
Yeah. Well, that's a great answer in a short time, I'd say. Here's another hard one from Lori. I understand I can feel the divine intelligence and infinite depth of every cell in my body, and I'm truly in awe. But how do we reconcile when these divine intelligence cells go awry into, I'm not sure what I'm saying there, but a cancer cell? Like, what happens when there's kind of a disturbance in that field, and we might interpret that as reflective of some sense of punishment or fear, I guess, brings us back to that question of how do we deal with kind of that childlike sense of, fear of reward and punishment, or blaming the self when something happens. Again, it's a big theological question, which is not generally what we tend to deal with here. But here it might just be noticing the inclination to blame, right? And to counter it with the love, that you were speaking of. I don't know, do you have anything you want to respond to about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is another doozy of a question, because right? It's again, the way that I hear this question is really asking to talk about the presence of evil,
Mhm.
And how do you reconcile the presence of evil in the world with that kind of non-dual awareness of everything being an expression of God,
Mhm.
if you hold in that piece here.
Right.
And, again, I think fundamentally where we get caught in this question is by, again, thinking of God as this thing that's outside of ourselves, in some ways. So that's that whole language of punishment.
Right.
I'm having cancer, I'm having illness in my mind because I'm being punished in some way, or I didn't do something correctly, I didn't live. All of those things are based on kind of that assumption about God as being this presence that's separate from us. And instead, I guess I think what I resonate to the most is that for whatever mysterious reason, the way that the world has unfolded and created as far as nature goes, nature being, concrete physical laws, and that however we want to understand why did the world come into being as the natural world that we know it? That's a question I can't really answer, but in our natural world, there is death and decay. We don't look at people dying, especially after old age or whatever it is, and say there's something evil about that. We say that it's something that's natural. And
Right.
And I think that there's a part in our own, cancer or sickness, especially when we see it in people who are young, that feels like a huge injustice. And we have this expectation in our minds that we should all live until, 80, 90 years old, whatever it is. That's an expectation that we have. And then the world unfolds in its natural way that doesn't fit that expectation. And how do we open to that? But to me, it's more about the cancerous cells is more about speaking about kind of the laws of our world, of nature, and how things unfold.
Yeah. Well, we covered a lot of some of the most difficult theological questions rabbis can get, in about 10 minutes. So that's extremely impressive and beautifully done. Maybe to end with this, I'm thinking about fear. I'm thinking about the song that many people know with the words attributed to Rabbi Nachman of Wroclaw, Kol Haolam Kolo Gesher Tsar Ma'od, that the world's a very narrow bridge, and the main teaching is, and it's what the language that's attributed to Rabbi Nachman is lo lepached klal, not to fear at all. The main thing is don't be afraid. But that one of the teachings that I love is that when on closer examination, that the real teaching is that Rabbi Nachman said lo lehitpached or shelo yitpached, that you shouldn't frighten yourself, which is to say fear has a purpose. It's not that we shouldn't fear. So that's one part of what I'm taking from your teaching today is fear has a role to play. What we need to be cautious about is not inflaming fear, not turning it into panic, right? Not exacerbating the fear and letting it play its proper role in the larger scheme. And as you said, and balance it with a lot of love, with ahava as well. So I want to thank you, Kavod, for lifting that up and helping us find, what I hope is a spiritually useful way for us to work with our fear without being paralyzed by it or falling prey to self-blame, transforming it into self-shaming or blaming in the way that you were, describing. So, friends, great to be with you. It's great to welcome a wonderful new teacher to our rotation today, Rabbi Kavod Wieder of Temple Bethel of South Orange County. Putting the link to Kavod's shul in the chat box for those who'd like to check out their offerings. And of course, many thanks to Kat Esposito for holding our space. And most of all, thanks to each and every one of you for your incredible dedication to your practice, your devotion to this community of practice, showing up. And I know in the chat, there's always just a wonderful sharing, a lot of honest sharing, a lot of vulnerability, and a tremendous amount of support for each other. So I just want to recognize that and appreciate it deeply. So many blessings to everyone. Be safe and well. We hope to see you tomorrow for practice with Dr. David Gottlieb at our usual time. Kavod, thanks again. Have a beautiful day.
Thank
out
you.
there in
Thank you,
California.
everybody, for
Okay.
being here today.
Great to be with you. Many thanks, everyone. Be well.